welcome to God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson. Reach him at gods5minutes@gmail.com. Now, here's Ed Wilson with God's 5 Minutes.
Hello, friends. 1 Samuel 25 describes how David with his outlaw band needed supplies in their wilderness hideaway. With the confidence of a man who knows his hunted status is unjustified, that he is acting in the service of his country and deserves the support of his countrymen, David came to farmer Nabal with his needs and was rudely thrust away. He meditated vengeance against the man until Nabal's wife, Abigail, courageously approached him with these verses. "Since the Lord hath withholden thee from coming to shed blood, now let thine enemies be as Nabal." Abigail had wisely swept away to David's little army with as much as she could of the goods he had requested, and she asked him to distribute among his warriors in the hope of placating not only David, but also his hot-blooded troop. And then she proceeded to save David's soul. Put in my language, Abigail said, "Pardon me for coming like this and saying this, but I know you're out there in this wilderness because you are fighting God's battles. You've an excellent reputation. No one can say you've done evil. Yet a man is risen to pursue thee and to seek thy soul. But the soul of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of life with the Lord thy God. And the souls of thine enemies, them shall he sling out, as out of the middle of a sling." Abigail was too delicate to mention Saul by name. She merely called him a man. But she reassured David, "God has bundled you in a group with the living. David, I know God will keep you safe. He's not through with you." And then she touched him deeply by saying, "The souls of your enemies God is sure to sling out from the bundle of life, as out of the pocket in the sling where the stone is placed when the slinger begins to whirl it over his head." The wise reference to the instrument God had helped David use in his tremendous victory over Goliath was exactly the right way to touch his heart. David was living like a hunted animal, forever wary, endlessly watchful, distrusting everyone around him as a hounded fugitive always must. In this state of heightened awareness of danger, he was vulnerable to overreacting to the provocation churlish Nabal offered, dipping his flag in a bloody spot that would taint his entire reign as king with reproach of his citizens. At the same time, it robbed that reign of some of God's blessing. David needed a calm voice and clear head to remind him that not every ejection around him was as severe or to be met with the same response as that of Saul. God sent him Abigail. In her demure, modest way, she put her hand on his sleeve in a manner of speaking and looked into the future. "And it shall come to pass, when the Lord shall have done with my Lord according to all the good that he hath spoken concerning thee, and shall have appointed thee rule over Israel, that this shall be no grief unto thee, nor offense of heart unto my Lord, either that thou hast shed blood causeless, or that my Lord hath avenged himself." David was a man who could take advice from a woman and who would allow reason to cool his ardor. Well, the troops were fed. The rude man's very wife had come to beg for the mercy Nabal was too foolish to see he needed. There was nothing left to be gained by lopping off his head, and certainly much to lose. David was on the brink of changing himself from being a noble, persecuted man of God to becoming a common criminal in the force of a sudden temptation. We're all subject to times like he did. It is God's mercy to send us an Abigail, and it is critical for us to listen when she comes. Abigail's conversation with David did not end when she had persuaded him to stay his hand. She looked even farther into what lay ahead, and now like a servant come to ask favor of a monarch, she said, "When the Lord shall have dealt well with my Lord, then remember thine handmaid. When you become king, David, remember me." He did. He took her into the palace, where she was the wisest of those ladies who lived there. May God grant us Abigails when we need them. May God grant us humility matching theirs to enable us to accept wise counsel. Have you talked to God today?
You have been listening to God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson. Reach him by email at godsfiveminutes@gmail.com. Tune in next time to hear more encouraging thoughts from God's Word on God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson.